Welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm Villain Theory, and I'm here with Nelson. And Nelson, tell us what we're talking about today.
Today, we are following up our aggression discussion, which was last episode. And if you have not listened to that, you definitely should, with justice. And we're also going to be talking a little bit more about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is the upcoming announcement that was just teased at Gen Con a couple of weeks ago. And it like worked out that we're getting to talk about it here because a lot of the S.H.I.E.L.D. like current archetypes are in the justice aspect. So I'm really excited about S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm excited to talk about it and justice. But that is what we are talking about today.
Yeah, I think they're both really interesting to talk about, and both in some ways have got a slightly mixed reaction online. I was surprised quite a few of the questions we got today were slightly negative or asking, how can I deal with something? There are plenty of positive, but definitely justice has some people divided, and I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a little bit like that too. So maybe we can unpack that a bit, and we'll see how me and Nelson feel about both of those things as we go.
Absolutely. And I think like last time, it was the first time we'd ever done one of these aspect discussions with the aggression, and it kind of did form into something that WizRad, who, if you are not familiar, we do put out community post and ask for people to send in questions. So WizRad send in a question, talk about different justice archetypes, and that's basically what this podcast is going to be doing. So there's a lot of them. I think I want to start out just by like high level. What is your favorite way to play justice? Or in other words, what's your favorite justice archetype?
That's really interesting. I like to do weird stuff with justice. I don't, removing threat is what justice is about. It's the yellow aspect, the yellow cards. They remove the yellow tokens, That's fine, but I like to do all the other stuff in justice. So for me, probably my favorite justice card, I think I've said this before on different things, is Global Logistics. So it's a S.H.I.E.L.D. actual event card. And you can build fully into S.H.I.E.L.D. You can do different things with S.H.I.E.L.D. But I just sometimes like to take just free of that event. You have to exhaust something, it's 0 cost, and it says, look at the top cards of a deck, mess around with them, rearrange them, discard them, whatever you want with them. And I love having that kind of control over the encounter deck. You can set things up, line them up, and it makes me feel like really tactical and clever. Yeah. And I kind of enjoy that. If you really feel like I'm there manipulating things, kind of spy-like, and that is going to be probably my favorite one.
Yeah, the Gambit Cosmo card. That's what I like to think of. Yeah, things that can tie into global logistics. It's such an interesting card and has different impacts based on the scenario and the hero you're playing. I think S.H.I.E.L.D. is probably one of my favorite ways to play justice. It's definitely not the strongest. My favorite way to play justice is definitely not the strongest, but I do really like the alter ego only builds. And in true solo, justice is really kind of where those can really thrive, where you just never flip the hero form and try and figure out. It's like a little puzzle for me to solve, and I do really enjoy like the stay in alter ego, never flip up, and actually a lot of that has to do with S.H.I.E.L.D. right? Like you just you're sitting as Natasha in your command chair and just commanding the forces of S.H.I.E.L.D., and so it kind of works out. But I enjoy justice. I think justice is one of the stronger aspects. What about you? Do you enjoy the yellow aspect?
I'm going to say with the right deck, yes, but I don't always enjoy it. And I'm going to circle back to this very slightly because I want to pick up on something else you said. Because you said staying in alter ego. I want to talk to you about disguise. Have you had much time to try disguise yet?
I have messed around with disguise a little bit. I did a Black Widow alter ego only deck, which I have had a couple of iterations throughout the years on, and disguise makes it into that deck now, right? Like, because if you're only sitting in alter ego, your basic activation doesn't do a whole lot, especially if you're not taking hits, right? You're not going to be recovering. So usually I lean into like meditation for kind of a resource ramp, and then having disguise worked out there. It's not a card. Disguise to me feels like a card where I am putting it in my deck and trying to build around disguise and making it work, but it's not a deck that I have found that it has a permanent home in yet, if that makes sense. What about you?
Yeah, I've always been very skeptical of the stay alter ego kind of deck. So I'm like, why don't I just flip the hero every other turn, and like, do some of that stuff as well. But
because it's fun, Villain Theory, because it's fun.
Well, I'm going to say yes, it is, because we literally, just a couple hours ago, we finished a game on the table. It's a 2-player game of Captain Marvel and Adam Warlock, and we had all 3 copies of Disguise mixed into that. And we got both of them very fortunately, turn one in the mulligan, so we had both had disguise out for the entire game.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was super, super fun. I really enjoyed that. With Adam, I could take all the alter ego stuff from all the aspects. And then with Captain Marvel, we went crazy with Shield, in addition to
That's cool.
disguise. And yeah, that was extremely fun. The main scheme was still a little bit dicey at a couple of points. We were against Claw, though. So, he is a pretty decent scheme, I guess. But my impression so far is that disguise is really fun, but it's not going to compete with any of the top justice strategies. Interesting
Yeah.
for Hulk because he goes from zero scheme basically, sorry, zero thwarting to to thwarting basically.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, it's less of an impact.
Yeah, yeah. I like that the card exists. At this point in the game's life cycle, we're getting kind of very specific cards that fill random niches here and there. And disguise is one of those, and I'm here for it. So I'm glad that the game or the card is in the game. I just it's not a card that I'm like, oh, this deck needs a disguise. It's more like, oh, this is gonna be fun if I run, this route with the deck.
Yeah.
But that does lead me into another question that we got from Jasco, which is what are some cards that really spice justice up? And what heroes do you find to be most exciting in Justice? So a little bit of a two-parter here, but I think Disguise is one of those cards that changes up the way that you're going to play the game. But I thought that this was a fun question. I want to hear your thoughts on it, and you cannot say Disguise. I'm going to force you to say a different one.
Well, disguise comes with Jubilee's pack. She's the latest hero at the time of recording. And she also comes with a little card called Husk. And we put Husk into that alter ego Ernie strategy as well. So anything we could, that was in our hand that we couldn't play in alter ego, we just fed into Husk and Husk went crazy.
Nice.
And it worked really well. Before that, a few days ago, we played Bishop in Justice with Husk. So I'm going to say hero I'm really enjoying right now. Actually, in Justice is Bishop, and Husk is a big part of that because sometimes I have like 5 resource cards in hand with Bishop. He's the resource guy, and Husk is like, I'll take all of those. And suddenly she's done like, I don't know, 15 damage or something ridiculous. So ready her up, ready her up, ready her up, and healing her. So Husk for me has been extremely fun, and I've actually been enjoying Bishop a lot in Justice as well. What about you?
Ooh, I like there's so many like fun ways to take justice. I mean, float like a butterfly, I think at the time really spiced justice up where every single time you do it or you attack an enemy, a confused enemy, that attack deals 1 additional damage. And the combos that you can pull off, like War Machine shoulder cannoning for 48 damage is fun. I mean, it just is, right?
Yep.
You feel epic, it feels really cool. I think that one is probably a little bit more mainstream, like, right? It's just like that cool extra spice that gets added to Justice more recently. I find that I'm gonna kind of morph the answers a little bit. I think that Justice is one of the better support aspects, because of player side schemes. Player side schemes coming out, being able to put them onto the table, give benefits to your friends. Justice enables you to clear those very, very quickly. And so my favorite, maybe like it's not a justice card, but all the player side schemes, whether you're running additional aspects, you're a multi-aspect hero, other characters are bringing them to the table, or just those basic ones. I think the justice side schemes are they're okay. But I do really like that and putting in cards that enable you to take those out, passing out the skilled investigators, and honestly, Miss Marvel and Justice. I mean, tale as old as time, but she
Yeah.
is so incredibly powerful in Justice, being able to shrink those thwart events, adding more threat removal to them, and ugh, Overwatch, Miss Marvel, Passion for, and you can it's like I just removed 24 threat from the table, and it's like that's just a good time. So I really do like Miss Marvel, but I also need to mention Cable here. Cable is a
Yeah.
really fun Justice character, especially if you're running in those higher player counts, as like kind of passing out all the toys.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Justice for me, it definitely changes a lot between solo and multiplayer, but like multiplayer, whoever's bringing the side schemes, you can help them out with that. And you can even, start to bring more because, you can know you've got your threat removal to rely on. Cable is sort of the, personified in a hero, that
Yeah.
kind of concept. So that's really cool. I actually do want to shout out the new Justice side scheme, Generation X. Is very good if you've got like X-Men around to get the bonus forwarding on it and that. I have found that quite useful, actually, especially on Cable. I think it's ridiculous on Cable to, just get his huge events and just do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. No, It's insane. If you haven't tried it, one way or another, especially in those lower player count games, it can work in multiplayer, but lower player count games, one way or another, some incredible efficiency, especially if you lean into getting the benefits of defeating the side schemes. You're going to be pulling out a side scheme, drawing 3 cards. If you can clear that side scheme and you can follow it up with a Turn the Tide, you can follow up with the Skilled Investigator, a follow, like there's just a lot of things that lean into that. If you have not tried that yet, absolutely try it, because it's a blast to play and you feel kind of invincible sometimes pulling those side schemes out of the deck and then benefiting from them.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting how much card draw Justice has, because I can use
Mm.
one way or another, and I've got 3 cards. I can then play Clear the Area to get rid of it, and I draw a card. Then Skilled Investigator gives me another card, and suddenly I've got like 5 different cards I didn't have originally, and I've basically like only spent those cards, 5 cards to get 5 cards kind of thing. And it's like, okay, it's just very, very powerful. So you can sort of draw through your deck. If you're a character that has setup pieces, you can set them up really fast. If you're a character that has really powerful signature cards, something like Ironheart getting those progression counters, or Scarlet Witch using Hex Bolts, that's very strong. And I think that's probably one of the stronger ways to play Justice. And I want to say this to you.
Hexbolt is such a fun card.
Oh, Hexbolt is one of my favorite cards. I think I said this in a different video of mine, but I've said Hexbolt kind of is Marvel Champions because it does damage, it's threat removal, and so it's a little bit random, but a little bit like the nature of Marvel Champions being a card game. It kind of just does everything, but not everything at once. Most of the time, I like it. I like it a lot. You could even one way or another clear the area, Skilled Investigator, into finding a couple of Hexbolts, then use those to find even more cards because they draw cards. It's the whole thing. But I'm gonna ask you a bit of a spicy, controversial question. This is just coming from me. Justice is very, very good, particularly in solo. Is it too good?
No. I no. I don't know if I subscribe to the idea that anything is too good in a cooperative game. Has it gotten more love over the years than some of the other aspects? Maybe. I don't think it's too good, right? Like you always have the option to not play in the rounds. I think in true solo, it probably is the best aspect at this point, just because of how much access to confuse you have, how it enables you to play a lot of your hero identity card or your identity specific cards. I think Justice, potentially Leadership, just kind of on those are going to be the top 2. But like if you look at how good it is compared to other aspects, I don't know if the delta in power level is enough to say it's too good. I think that probably the lowest aspect on average across all player counts would probably be protection. Would you agree with that?
It's difficult. I think on average, yeah, across all of them. I mean, excluding Pool for obvious reasons, it's not a full aspect. Yeah, I would go with protection. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the difference that protection to justice, I don't think it's that big, especially with 50 plus heroes in the game. There are going to be some where protection is going to be a better build than their justice build, which means that like I think if I was to consider something too good, justice would always be the best build for every single hero, and I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, I pretty much agree. I do think it is, talking solo specifically, significantly better than, let's say, aggression protection. I do think it's quite a wide gulf overall, but I don't necessarily think it's too good. Some of the cards are, very, very strong. Most of you guys, or at least a big portion, I imagine, do watch our YouTube channels as well. I mean, Nelson have a draft on his channel, and last time we did the best aggression cards, and I've been preparing for the best justice cards, and I can tell you that it's really, really difficult because they are all very, very, very good. My top 10 is a lot more. I've got cards that are like ended up like to one of my top 15, and I want to, I'm trying to narrow it down to my top 5 for the draft, and I'm thinking these would have beaten a lot of my top 5 for aggression is kind of where I've ended up with that. So I feel like the top end of justice is maybe a lot better than the top end of certain other aspects, but not necessarily too strong. And like you say, it's a cooperative game. You don't have to use what you use. And talking on the solo thing, no one else even at the table is overshadowed or anything like that.
Yeah, which like I think if I had to choose a aspect that would be the best, I would choose Justice, just from a conceptual level of what the aspects do. And this actually kind of leads into another question that we got from Forrest, which is, what is a good way of explaining the importance of threat removal to a new player? I want the best aspect, maybe not to rush the game state, but if playing or if mitigating the loss condition should probably be the best aspect in my opinion. And so to kind of answer Forrest's question, then we can kind of have this discussion. Explaining threat removal to a new player, when the hero is not there fighting the big bad, right? The big bad has other plans. The big bad, I think of like the hero as almost the big bad's like crisis icon that they have. They have to fight the hero because the hero is trying to stop them from doing whatever the villain wants to do. Rhino is trying to break into a bank. Like that's the kind of story behind the Rhino encounter. So threat is adding presence to being able to get into that bank. And once that is broken in, once you hit that 7 threat cap hold, you lose the game. 7 threat per player. And so when you're an alter ego, you're not fighting Rhino. Rhino's able to dedicate his entire everything he has to breaking into the bank, which is why he's scheming on the bank. And if you're able to remove the threat, you're removing the loss condition, which then prolongs the game, which can accelerate you into a victory condition. But from a thematic standpoint, it's like you're removing, maybe you're like repairing doors or whatever. I don't know.
He's stealing stuff, halfway out the door. You grab the things, put them back on the shelf. He's not stealing those anymore.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, like, what are your thoughts around that? Well, one, the how would you explain, or would you change any of the explanation and how or why removing threat is good? But if you had to choose one of the aspects to be the best aspect, what would it be?
I like your explanation, and I do want to add something to it, but I kind of don't. I kind of want the official Shadow of the Cast sort of statement to be that threat removal is important because we need to repair doors.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm quite a mechanical player, and how I think about things is quite mechanical. So I do like the thematics of it, which is, the villain's trying to do something bad. You need to sabotage it, undo it, get the people out the way, stop the thing spreading, whatever their plan is. But at the end of the day, there are 2 loss conditions and 1 win condition in most scenarios. Win condition is, hit the baddie enough so the baddie stops hitting you, or, make sure they don't hit you enough, make sure your hit points aren't depleted, make sure the main scheme doesn't go over. If the main scheme goes over, everyone loses. So I think a lot of people come from games where there aren't, this third dimension where it's like damage going backwards and forwards in a kind of a 2-way kind of thing, whereas threat, being up there and fully interactable is kind of this third kind of dynamic that isn't as obvious. So it's just, keeping the importance there that you're going to lose the game if you don't, repair those doors.
Yeah.
So it is just something to keep an eye on. But otherwise, no, I like your explanation. I also think it's worth saying that threat removal per point is typically priced more expensive than damage. So if someone has a good opportunity to remove threat, it's really important, like, perhaps they take it rather than someone else, because they might not have the opportunity or they might not be able to afford it as much. So it is just worth keeping an eye on. It's something everyone kind of has to chip in with. Just player more than usual, but everyone should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then would you make, if you had to blank slate just kind of with the conceptual ideas of what every aspect does, which one would you want to be the strongest?
That's really interesting. I'm probably actually going to go out there and say leadership, because I think it's like the jack of all trades. So it's doing a little bit of everything. And I feel like if everything is contributing to a stronger package overall, it also bodes well for the other aspects, kind of, if you make sense, because it's kind of in the middle. True. So, but I mean, ideally, I guess I'd be saying I want all of them to be equal, but I guess that's a bit of too easy of an answer.
No, that's fair. I like it. That's fair. That's game balance, right?
Yeah, see, I'm too mechanical. I want it to be all perfectly balanced or neatly set.
Yeah. I think it boils down to kind of what I was thinking, is that the strongest aspects from a theoretical standpoint in my mind should be the ones that prolong the game or prolong the loss condition rather than accelerate the win condition.
Yeah.
Because if the strongest aspect accelerates the win condition, why ever play the other ones? So in that sense, like I wish protection maybe would be the best, but that may be just my own personal bias creeping in, which we don't do here on Shadow of the Cast.
Perish the force.
Jeez.
I would like protection to get some, fun new cards, and I would like aggression too as well. And I'd like all of the aspects to get fun new cards. To be honest
Oh
with
yeah.
you. Speaking of
Oh
fun
yeah.
new cards, I am glad you brought up Float Like a Butterfly. I have really enjoyed that card. That is a really cool new way to, we've always had decks that can confuse a lot, but we've got more confuses now, and now we can capitalize on it. That's really fun synergy. I'm gonna go to a different question now,
Sure.
and a bit of a simpler question, but this is a card that I've seen being getting more prominence on certain YouTubers' gameplay and things like this, and that's the card Beat Cop. So we've got a question from Dimiev here, who says, "Well, I don't have a question in mind. I would like to discuss my favorite Justice card, Beat Cop." And they say they'll rephrase it as a question, Beat Cop?
Yes. I don't know how to answer a beat cop question. No, I'm just yeah, I think beat cop is getting a little bit more love recently. My mind immediately goes to shopping spree, right? Like you're able to use supports to pull threat off of Jubilee's personal side scheme so that you can, get those items out. But beat cop, you can exhaust beat cop, remove a threat from a scheme, move it to beat cop, or you can exhaust beat cop, deal the amount of threat as damage to a minion. I think minions are getting worse in the game, as in they're getting stronger, right? Like we're
Yeah.
seeing more and we're seeing stronger and stronger minions. And so having an answer to those minions that also prevents the loss condition feels pretty good. Now it is slow, right? Like it's a 3 cost, removing 1 threat per turn is a slower card. But in true solo, if you're pulling it just from the main scheme, you're canceling out most scenarios added threat, right? Like you add 1 threat per player, B cup takes it away. Then if you have 3 B cups, and it's kind of fun to control the army. Um but yeah, I think it's it's a fun card. I just I'm not a huge B cup player. I don't think that it's the most efficient or the best card, but I do think it's a fun card.
Yeah, I actually used to play Beat Cop all the time when I first started playing, actually for quite a few months. There was always at least one Beat Cop. Sometimes there were free, and I loved that card because I thought it was just so efficient, like infinite threat removal.
Yeah.
And if there's a big minion, yeah, okay, I can knock it out. And somebody told me it's too slow, it's not fast enough. And I was like, I don't agree with that. But then I took it out, and I took it out, and I never really added it back in. I was like, maybe they had a
Yeah.
point of that. And it's kind of circled around because we have certain new characters are very rich in resources. Characters like Bishop, Magic can very easily afford them. I think shopping sprees on the right lines. I actually think player side schemes in general have kind of almost brought it back as well, because now there's more opportunities where efficiently removing that little bit of threat can really make the difference. I could line up, I clear the area if I've got a beat cop on a free threat side scheme, that kind of thing. So I think there's a few different factors bringing it around that I think make it maybe more popular. I still think it definitely has its flaws of being very, very slow. There are times where, it's kind of a luxury play. If you can afford to play something so expensive but so slow, a lot of the time you would have been fine without it, right? Because
Yeah.
if you were under pressure, you would have to do something else. But if you can get it set up, it's then going to pay off big time. So it's an interesting card. I really like that card actually, but I don't use it a ton. But I'm probably using it slightly more myself.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the other kind of benefit that you can have with BCOP is that it is a support that leaves play. So build support is you grab XJet, you grab your helicarrier, you grab everything that are your normal targets for build support, and build support's buried on the bottom of the deck. I've had games where build support doesn't have any targets left. BCOP is a 3 cost support, so you can grab BCOP and put it into play. Um, and still get utilization out of the player side scheme, even if it is buried. But um, so I think I've done that before. I think that's fun. But yeah, I actually like. I'm kind of curious. I don't think I ever really use. I would say the majority of the B cops that I play, I don't use it for minion clearing. I'm just using it as that permanent -1 threat. Um, and like I get 3 of them out there or 2 of them out there, and it's like the idea of using them for minion clearing almost escapes my mind sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, they can do that. Because I think in the game damage is just way easier to come by than threat removal.
I don't think that's too abnormal. I definitely have a small bit of that, although I do use them, but it's only normally, oh, this means a problem, I don't have a good solution. Oh, I guess now I'll cash in the beat cup kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've actually used them to really good effect against Hela, because you kind of want to play slow sometimes and leave the first thing out, and there's acceleration on that, so you have more threat than usual for the beat cup to shovel. But then beat cop can just, annihilate one of these huge mythical monsters, which feels really, really awesome. So that
I
has been
think
a
one
fun
of
use.
the I think one of the monthly challenges back when we used to do those on the Discord was I can't remember if it was kill dragon with beat cop or like however try and do as much damage as possible with beat cop. And so like dragon with 10 health per player, like there were people out there doing like 15 damage with a beat cop drop and it was just like, oh my gosh. I just picture this epic like this small like, beat cop running up to this dragon and just like taking it out.
I think I did that challenge, and I think I used like Gatekeeper on like Spider-Man or something to add health onto the minions so I could like hit it
Yes.
harder. That kind of thing I think was happening.
That's
That was a
awesome.
really cool challenge. So yeah, B
That was
Cup's
fun.
really fun.
B Cup to me feels like a ally that has been labeled as a support. And so I want to talk about Jacob Rear's question. And I'm kind of curious if you've already answered this with your Husk argument, but Jacob asked, who is your favorite Justice ally?
We'll say Husk is my sort of flavor of the month, new shiny toys. That's my
Yeah.
current favorite, maybe. But
Yeah.
I have a lot of favorites. I mean, this isn't necessarily my favorite, but I think it's a good opportunity to talk about it. We also got Chamber in Jubilee's pack, which is a 4-cost ally as well, who doesn't take consequential damage if the enemy is confused. So it's going straight into that float like a butterfly kind of archetype. I found Chamber surprisingly useful because they've got 2 attack and 2 thwarting and 3 hit points. So I don't have to make sure they're not taking consequential damage. I've got, 2, 3 uses of them. So, the enemy's not confused. Don't worry. I can still, hit something and I don't really care. I've got, those extra hit points, or I can thwart a couple times. Then when they're confused and float is down, I can start getting the, bonus damage. So I've actually really enjoyed Chamber. Chamber has exceeded my expectations. So that's always fun. A favorite for me, I have 2 obvious favorites and they're 2 very good allies. But for multiplayer, there's very little more satisfying to me than playing Spider-Man Peter Parker and just annihilating
Yes.
its Ice Cube.
100%. So good.
And the other one
Ugh.
is Wiccan because I get to 4 and suddenly, bam, 3 damage, which isn't common, but it does happen.
It depends on if you're using global logistics, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite Justice decks I've played is like Gambit with Global Logistics and Wiccan, and I can just set everything up for everything, and I just think that's really fun. Even if there's some, maybe diminishing returns, I can't see as far ahead with Global Logistics if something else is discarding, but it's fun, it's awesome, I really enjoy it. What about you?
yeah. So I really like Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones scales scales her threat based on the number of side schemes that are out, and it's just really satisfying to me to abuse that. It's like 4 horsemen, 4 players starting with 4 side schemes, and now all of a sudden you throw a player side scheme out there, and she's thwarting for 6, and you're like, yeah, that's fun. So I really do like Jessica Jones. I like Dazzler just because I do really like Confuse. Cypher's pretty cool. When you attack a confused enemy, you get to draw a card. That's
Yeah.
always fun. But I think, like, I'm gonna just reiterate: Spider-Man and like higher player count games is just a bomb, and it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue he still even has use in like 2-player, but as soon as you hit 3-player, it's stupid. As soon as you hit 4-player,
Yeah.
it's just so good.
Especially now with player side schemes, because the majority of our
Yeah.
player side schemes, he just clears regardless of player count. And then you have a fairly decent. He's a 2/4, or is he a 2/5?
Yeah. I think he's got 4 health, but that's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, so it's expensive. He costs 5, but now that we have a lot more rich heroes, similar to like our discussion around B Cop, I think Spider-Man is one of those characters that you can dust off and put back into your decks and have some fun with.
Yeah, definitely. Really a big fan of that.
And we did have a couple of questions, and I think Spider-Man bridges the gap here pretty well between Justice in solo versus Justice in multiplayer. And we got a couple of questions for those, but just kind of conceptually, do you feel that the role or the way that you're going to build a Justice deck changes if you are playing with 1 hero at the table versus 4 heroes at the table, or is it kind of wanting to do the same thing?
Yeah, I build extremely differently. We actually got a few questions about the difference between solo and multiplayer for Justice and also deck building for it. And for me, in solo play, when I'm deck building in general, I'm always trying to basically bring enough of everything. So I need a certain amount of damage to win the game, but I need to not lose to threat, so I need a certain amount of threat removal, and the villain's hitting me, so I need a certain amount of, survivability kind of stuff. So you can just build, more in for damage, or if you're against a certain scenario that needs more threat removal, lean more into that. But for me, when I'm building for solo, I'm using Justice to add in efficient threat removal to cover what I need there, but also maybe card draw to support the other things, or some of the unique ways that you can damage with Justice. Whereas in multiplayer, scaling up to the extreme in 4-player, if I'm playing Justice, I am now threat focused, and that is my kind of, the direction of my entire deck is shovel all those yellow tokens away as fast as possible, as best as possible.
Yep.
So it does change dramatically, and it's tricky because, I play at my local stores sometimes, and someone will say, I'll play Justice, and normally we do fine anyway. It's not a big deal, but, they'll pull out what I perceive to be a solo Justice deck. It'll be like clear the area, turn the tide, one way or another. And I should say one way or another can be used in multiplayer, but you kind of need a plan around it. Yeah, Spider-Man or side schemes which don't scale. Last time it was used at my local, we got a 10 crisis thing added to the table, like an obvious answer.
Yikes.
It's fine. It's just, getting used to it, and it's just how it is. But that was a deck that was definitely designed, in my opinion, for solo play, because clear the area, turn the tide. These are things that want to remove the last threat from a scheme to get the bonus. And in multiplayer, sometimes the main scheme, someone puts a couple of advances. Sometimes the main scheme's got 15, 20 threat on it, and that person isn't easily going to be able to hit those things. A card which removes 2 threat is suddenly almost irrelevant. It can still be used, but it's very different from, I throw down Crisis Averted with Overwatch and I've removed 12 threat, which is obviously a much more meaningful number for multiplayer. So hopefully that kind of answers that. I definitely specialize way more heavily into threat removal in multiplayer, whereas in solo, I'm just using it for the efficient threat removal to round out a weakness or just round out the deck in general, or bring card draw or something like that. We actually have a couple of deck building questions related to solo and multiplayer, but before we get to those specific ones, is there anything you wanted to say about that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with kind of, it is very different, right? And I think we can extrapolate that out to other aspects as well. But anytime I'm building a solo, I'm rounding out the hero's kit. And anytime I'm building for multiplayer, I'm trying to amplify what they're good at or what the aspect is good at, as a general rule of thumb. So yeah, I think you said it perfect. And I think that these other questions are going to help us expand on it a little bit more. So I'm actually, I have not watched your Jubilee review, but we got a question about Brachiosaurus, and apparently you talked about that. When do you know when there's enough thwarting in the deck? And I'm kind of curious if you want to explain yourself.
Yeah, so in my Justice review, I talk about her coat, which it's kind of almost a hone technique for your threat removal. It's a separate kind of thing, but I play a 3-cost thwarting event and I get to remove 3 extra threat. And for me, that's often too much in solo play. So I'm often building in the threat removal I need in Jubilee without relying on her coat upgrade. And it's interesting, how much thwarting is enough in a deck, because that's actually kind of what I was just talking about. I just use it to cover the threat I need. And I think to some degree, it's going to come with experience, because every hero needs a different amount of threat removal. If I'm Hulk and I'm, going in Justice, I'm going to need a lot more threat removal. Whereas I'm someone like Psylocke, I've played Psylocke in all different aspects in 2-player and just covered the threat entirely without adding a single threat removal card, because Psylocke's, got crazy threat removal. She can actually... So some characters need loads, some characters don't need any. So it's hero dependent, I would say. And you might have to fill that out. Once you have a rough idea how strong and consistent a hero is at threat removal, then you can start to say, I'm going to need a few more cards, or I'm going to need, I don't actually need to take this threat removal. And I think it's going to depend as well on how many allies you want to take as well. Because threat removal in solo isn't often needed in huge bursts. It's more of, you need a trickle, and allies are quite good at that. So sometimes you can kind of have the same amount of threat removal in 2 decks, but the one that can put it out at a slower pace might actually suit better for solo. Whereas in multiplayer, you might need those faster answers for, Crisis or Hazards, icon side schemes, which are huge.
Yeah. I think as you were talking, I was trying to figure out how I kind of think about it. I think when I'm building for a solo deck, I try and put as little threat removal in as I think I can get away with, because Justice I want damage. Damage is the win condition, right? And so if I throw 25 cards to round out the kit that are all threat removal, I'm relying on basic activations and my hero cards to do the damage. Justice has damage options. And so, and it, a lot of times it just comes down to a trial and error, even, and scenario specific. If you're going up against Red Skull, you're going to need more threat removal than if you're going up against Rhino, I guess, right? And so that is another kind of thing to be thinking about. But when I'm building a deck, if I'm playing Psylocke, I'm probably not putting in Crisis Averted in a solo game. I'm not. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not doing that. I'm not putting in. I'll double down. I'll say a firm statement here. And so that comes with an understanding of what the hero can do, and if the hero is really good at thwarting, honestly, I think that the most boring cards in Justice are the ones that just remove threat. And so, from an excitement as well as a power standpoint, the fewer of those that I can put away with and still win the game, that's how much threat removal you need. Which is not an answer, but it is.
It is an answer. I think that's a good answer. You know, you put in, the less you put in, the more you can put in for other stuff. So
Yeah.
it works out. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I skew towards more so in solo is preventing threat rather than threat removal. And I'm thinking mainly confused statuses here. I will lean into more confused, which also fills in like a float, like a butterfly type damage situation, where like just putting that in and preventing threat from ever getting onto the table. And then if I can utilize that confuse or utilize, no threat being added to the table, that also works for as like a how much threat removal. I'm doing air quotes like this is a video podcast. But so I also for a solo versus multiplayer build, I typically lean into confuse more so in solo than in multiplayer.
Yeah, I would generally agree. And I'll actually shout out a card that I think is good for all player counts, but is especially good for solo is Under Surveillance, which is kind of like a confuse in advance kind of thing. It's kind of like for Justice in advance. It's a 2-cost card, slap it on the main scheme. Now the main scheme can go up 4 more. I think that's good. It's good against Stalwart and Steady and kind of serves a similar purpose to confuse. The main scheme just won't suddenly go over out of nowhere and, lose the game. So in that case, it's kind of a magic card that saves the game. Yeah, that kind of thing is also. And on the flip side, we talked a lot about solo here. In multiplayer, taking it to 4-player, I kind of think you can almost not bring enough threat removal sometimes. Normally it's a case of, there's always threat to remove, and either you've removed all of it or you've left some and your buddies are going to help out with you. It depends on the luck of the side schemes a bit, but generally you can't go wrong with being fully focused on threat removal there. Worst case, you're just too safe on threat, and that's a good problem to have. But often
I've never had that problem. I'd love to have it someday.
Yeah. 2 and 3-player, it's like more of a balancing thing. It will depend on the heroes again. But yeah, you kind of have to fit it out with the heroes is what I feel like.
Yeah. We have a question from Dan the Crow. Is Justice always a good choice for solo play?
I'm going to say yes with an asterisk. The hero that springs to mind as not being good with it in solo play, and definitely maybe not multiplayer, would be Drax, because Drax has a very specific game plan where he wants to ready up an attack and kind of be attacked. And Justice can definitely buy him some time for that, but it doesn't really do enough of the other things he wants to do, in my opinion. You can make it work, but it's not a natural fit. Whereas I struggle to think of a single other hero where Justice doesn't just, work super easily for.
Yeah, it's always really good, but I think, going back, like they may be my last Justice may be my last pick for someone who's super heavily involved with thwarting. I'm thinking like Psylocke, Spider-Ham to some level, because he has the just remove threat equal to 2 encounters, and then he has he gets up to the 3 threat removal on just his basic activation, and then his other builds are just so much fun compared to Justice. And so I think that like a good choice, I think any hero can excel with any aspect at this point with the full card pool. And I know that not everyone has a full card pool. The game is getting really big, but the game is old enough that there are enough archetypes and enough different ways to play each archetype that I don't think that there's never a bad choice for a aspect for a hero. You can figure out how to make it work, and sometimes that's the most fun, to try and figure out how to make Drax and Justice work.
Yeah, I've actually tried that and had a lot of fun with it, so 100% recommend
Nice.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's fun. Should you like justice? Is justice boring? This is we got a couple of questions from BD, the Yak lives on the fence, etc. Couple other people asked, but do you like justice? Is justice boring? Is it lame?
Yeah, so you asked me a little bit earlier, do I like justice? And we actually got a lot of questions. People were saying things like, convince me, why should I like justice? Because I don't really like it. Or, and we had somebody else, I think one of the people you named, saying something along the lines of, you don't get those big dopamine hits. You're not dropping like a hone technique, huge attack, or this kind of thing. You're just keeping the threat in check. You're not pushing toward the win condition. And I think there's some merit to that. So when you ask me, do I like the justice aspect? Being brutally honest, it's probably these days my excluding pool, obviously, my least favorite aspect. But I will put an asterisk on that. Some of my favorite decks are justice decks. It's not as if I don't enjoy justice, but I don't enjoy it in such a broader way as I do with maybe most of the other aspects these days. I do think a lot of the cards, and you kind of said this earlier, some of the least interesting cards in justice are the threat removal cards. A lot of them, to me, they just say, pay this, remove this, number, and they're not as varied or interactive, I think, is like the aggression attacks or the protection defendy kind of stuff. There's definitely some interesting variation. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any, but I think it's less.
Yeah. I think justice is my least favorite solo aspect and potentially my favorite 4-player aspect. Because with player side schemes, I think player side schemes shook up the game for justice for me. It was my least favorite across all player counts, but I just from Marvel Champions, any game, I really do enjoy supports. And I feel like with the player side schemes, you get just so much support out of justice. And so like in a 4-player game, I do really enjoy justice. Building into like a remove threat, and I'm going to give you all the toys.
That's really funny because I'm the complete opposite. I actually enjoy it the
Nice.
most in solo, and I kind of detest it in multiplayer.
Amazing.
Because it's kind of what we're saying. You kind of can't get enough threat removal in like 4-player, and I like the non-threat removal stuff in Justice the most. So I can do more of that in solo is kind of where I'm coming from. The support is fun.
This is
What bothers me is the skilled investigator problem, because individually, I don't think this card is, I mean, it is extremely good, but you can't win a game of playing skilled investigator. This 0-cost upgrade that just might draw you a card every few turns or so. But at the same time, it's so incredibly good. Most of the, quote unquote meta, if you're trying to build like a really strong deck, if you're going into 3 or 4-player, you're probably bringing 3 skilled investigators. Now, something that kind of reduces your deck space a lot, and I don't know, it's not that interesting to me, is my kind of thing that I kind of feel like I have to take it. And I also kind of feel like I have to take even the odds, and because that's a thwarting card which scales up per player. And I don't have to, but I definitely feel the difference when I don't, that kind of thing. So there's some exceptions, but it's kind of, I feel like I have to go for this really strong threat removal in multiplayer. And I kind of feel like that's less creative and varied than what I'd be doing in aggression, trying to control the minions, or protection, trying to defend people. I feel like it would change more.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. No, yeah,
But part of the question here was, why should I like justice? And I think it's all the stuff you can do around that. Now, in 4 players, or as an example, something you can do, and this even works in every player count, even 2-player or 3-player, you can have 2 justice players. So you can kind of half the load you need in terms of threat removal. Some people can take, they can both take a bit of a threat removal. Then somebody could bring like a butterflies for the team, and we could have a cool confused support deck. Somebody else could take something like predictable ploy and kind of the spycraft, or encounter card control and different things like that. So I think splitting the burden in multiplayer could be really fun and let 2 people enjoy justice a lot more that way. One in solo, I think, kind of like Nelson says, try and put in the least amount of threat removal you need so you can put in more of the other kind of fun stuff. And I think it can really thrive there. I love the shield stuff. I feel like a butterfly's fun. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on with player side schemes. It's definitely the easiest aspect to take out specialized training. Then you can boost your stats. So if you're a readying hero, that's kind of awesome. So there's a lot of really fun stuff like that. What do you think, Nelson? Why should people like justice?
I think that justice is probably one of the best aspects to enable a hero kit playing hero cards as well. We talked about it a little bit earlier with like the amount of card draw, and I think this is actually what Get Up in Game had said about leadership probably about a year ago, and I think justice is starting to shift into that as a little bit more. But leadership, what Get Up and Game was saying, and now I'm applying it to justice as well, they are aspects that help highlight the hero kit so very well because they are able to mitigate all of the issues around the table and let your hero do what your hero wants to do, play those cards. You get a ton of card draw, so you're able to play multiple cards. You're able to find different allies. You're able to draw draw more cards. So my mind went one way or another to skilled investigator. I was like, oh yeah, more cards. And so I think approach it like that. Don't do a justice thing. Like if you're not enjoying justice, don't play justice. Put yellow cards in your deck that help you play your hero cards. And a lot of that is just going to be threat removal, but don't think of it as I'm playing justice. Think of it as I'm playing Groot or I'm playing Cable, and the yellow cards are going to be Cable's a bad example. I'm playing Captain America, and the yellow cards are saving the game. We're not losing the game so that Captain America can play the heroic strikes and the shield tosses and all that kind of stuff. So I think justice just enables the aspect, or not the aspect, but the identity specific card play really, really well.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think I said a little bit earlier, about Ironheart getting those cards that get progress counters more. You can definitely use Justice and, the
Yeah.
card draw for that. So, yeah, 100%. It kind of can amplify the hero and really set the hero up for success with their hero cards more than most aspects can. Leadership is up there
Yeah.
as well for doing it. But in some ways, Justice is burstier. If I hit that one way or another turn one, I spent one card and now I've got three new ones, and I can kind of set up more upgrades and everything so much faster. So it's kind of, yeah, really fun like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Good answer, Nelson. I like that a lot.
Thank you. Let's move on to kind of the tail end of the justice discussion with something we did talk about it a little bit in aggression. It may not have been as pointed as it's going to be here and going forward into our leadership and protection, but is justice missing anything? Is there anything that you would add to justice? Is it underdeveloped? We got a couple of questions like Knight Halcyon. Did I say that right? Did I say that right, Villain Theory?
I think so.
Okay, perfect. They're asking, is damage justice a real thing? Are there any things that you would like to see either rounded out or you think is absolutely just lacking in the justice aspect that you would like to see maybe in a shield expansion? I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting.
That's really interesting. And damage justice is pretty interesting because if you're throwing like 10 of ties in their stealth strike, you can get pretty consistent damage. And I do think people can underestimate how much damage you can get from that. I don't necessarily think you're going to become the main minion clearer in 4-player anytime soon, but I do think you can get pretty respectable damage out of it. So I don't think it's missing damage justice, but I kind of do feel like it's missing something. And I don't think there's any one specific thing I could point to right now. There's a good amount of stuff for it, but I feel like it has less stuff, less interesting hooks than the other aspects. So I'd like some more kind of hone technique style, build around kind of cards that we talked about in the other episodes. Something that maybe amplify some of the lesser used cards. I'd love to actually, maybe play a great responsibility deck on a character that's not, Spider-Ham or Colossus or something. I don't know. That's a random one. But, unused cards getting some love because of something like Monica Chang is a great example that because you play Monica Chang, you get a surveillance team in play for free and it gets a bonus and it will beef up your other surveillance teams, which gives them all value. A few more cards like that I think are really missing, but I don't think I necessarily feel like I need this one specific new thing. How do you feel, Nelson?
I agree, and I would also like to modify my previous answer. I do love Monica Chang. I don't think she's the strongest ally, but I really like what she did for other cards, bringing out the surveillance team. So my favorite Justice ally, I'm going to throw Monica Chang in there as one of my answers, just because I really do like how they did that. Um, I agree. I think that Justice is the most one-dimensional of all of the aspects, I believe. Right? Like in all of the other aspects we talked about in aggression, you have minion clearing, you have direct damage, you have, half health, like all of these different archetypes that are a little bit more defined than what you see in Justice, whereas Justice I see as I'm clearing threat, I'm confusing, or I don't know, right? Like, so I think that's, I guess Shield would be kind of the main other one, but I think I think you're right, and I'm also glad that I'm not a designer because I have no idea what that would be, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I think what's occurred to me is that what I think aggression has over justice, because they are both sort of the I output damage or I output threat. You know, they're the sort of direct output, kind of opposites of each other in a way. Aspects. What aggression has is its ally game is more refined. It has, boot camp,
Mhm.
energy spear, enraged, as well as attack training, as well as, war room.
Yeah,
Whereas you do have mission training and command center in Justice, but it's lacking a
sure.
couple of other tools to push you toward that more. I think that could be fleshed out. It's the same thing for basic attacking versus basic thwarting. I think basic attacking in aggression is more fleshed out than what Justice has. Although it does have some fun stuff that, making the entrance decks really, really fun. There's a few things, but I do think they could just expand on that to maybe match what aggression has in that area. That is going to be my new answer for what I think it is missing.
I like that. And I think like this is a nice bridge over to shield because the other ally type saving thing that we have in justice is field agent, right? So whenever a ally attacks or takes consequential damage, you can exhaust field agent to prevent that consequential damage, but it has to be a shield ally. I'd like to see some more things like that that enable the allies to kind of do your dirty work, like clearing up threat, to save that. But let's talk about shield. We did get a pretty hype new announcement, and I was telling Villain before we started, I was like, I think I haven't been online. I've been traveling. I've been at Gen Con, but I think we've gotten a couple of mixed thoughts on if Shield is a good next expansion. So I said it before, and I'll follow up. But I am very curious because you wouldn't tell me before we started. What do you think about the new Shield expansion?
So yeah, Nelson's clearly not seen my sort of review of the new teaser for the Agents of Shield expansion. And if you guys watch my channel, if you guys watch my Iceman review, I'll be very, very honest. And if it's negative, I'm gonna say it. So unfortunately for me, Agents of Shield looks really fun, and I'm really excited for it. uh,
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, no, the clue is, the first card I really named in this video, I think, was Global Logistics. I love the shield stuff. I'm hoping they kind of build on that theme because I even like the shield stuff in the other aspects in terms of, you've got, command team in leadership, med team in protection. You've got, these are cards which kind of interact with other things on the board, and I like that kind of interaction. They're combo cards. Dum Dum Dugan, as well as Homeland Intervention and Global Logistics, they're exhausting other shield cards. They're talking to each other. They're cards which talk to other cards
yeah.
to do different things. That's awesome. So, in terms of an expansion, in terms of player cards, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So, that makes me excited. And if the heroes kind of follow suit in terms of, cards interacting with cards, which is maybe a little bit too far to take this, but I can dream. And mechanically, mechanically, that excites me. But I also like characters that make me, let me do tactical stuff. And I feel like Spies is the perfect place to make those interesting decisions. And that is kind of what Shield is to me. Spies, it's information, it's that kind of,
Yeah.
So for me, it's actually really excited me. And it excites me for the game as well, because during that teaser, they said they were putting more resources into Marvel Champions than basically ever, I think is what they said, if I'm remembering right. And that's super exciting. So they're not going with the biggest, flashiest box. It's not Fantastic Four. It's not Daredevil. Where's Daredevil? They're going with something a little bit lower down because they're taking their time with it and they can afford to
Mhm.
because they're supporting the game for the long haul. So that's exciting. And I want to play some Spies. I want to do some 007 stuff, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I love the shield archetype. I love shield just kind of like from a meta sense of like I'm commanding spies, right? Like that's I think the word you used, and I really like that. Yeah, I was there at the presentation, and I think that was my biggest takeaway. Is the last thing you just said is that they explicitly said we're not this game is not dead. We're not slowing down. We've added resources to the team. They hired Tony just recently, and like there's a bright future for Marvel Champions, and that makes me really excited to get into some more of the I don't even know if I'd call Shield obscure, but some of the more obscure stuff, right? There are big names out there that we don't have, and both from a excitement standpoint, because half of these heroes probably before I ever started playing Marvel Champions I'd never heard of. And now we're getting more of that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So it brings me into the theme even more so. And like I've said this before I started playing Marvel Champions, I watched the movies, but I wasn't a Marvel fan. Now I'm a Marvel fan, and like so I'm getting more of that. But also from like a business side, it's like they can't put all the big names right up front and and then try and do all the smaller stuff later down the road. But like hearing that they are dedicating more resources, that it is not going anywhere, I think is the biggest takeaway from this. And I'm I'm pumped for Shield. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. We have a lot of support for Shield in Justice, and I'm hoping, like you said, we have some Shield stuff in other aspects, but I'm hoping that we get some more Monica Changs for the TAC teams of the world, or the
Yes.
the med teams of the world. Oh, let's go med teams. I just yeah, there's just so many different ways that are already established that they can, you know, expand into Shield, and there's always new stuff that I could have never imagined that they're going to do as well with Shield. And so I'm pumped. Um, Before we kind of talk a little bit more directly about the Shield and how we think this box is going to shake up, one of the things that I saw, I can't take credit for this. I think this was on Reddit, and I should have written down who said it, but the Spider Wave, which was our last kind of intermission box, had Shield in it. Do you think that they're going to kind of do the same thing here, where it's going to be primarily a Shield box and throw in a little bit of Spider stuff for us?
That's really interesting. I've not seen that Reddit post. I actually said a similar idea in my video
Oh,
about Shield
nice.
stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know who did it first, but one of my ideas was like, could they put in Web Warrior or like Champion stuff? There's a couple of heroes in here.
Yeah.
I'm going to softly predict no, and because the list of Shield heroes that I kind of came up with as possibilities seemed so cool, I don't want to miss out. But
True.
they could do it. They could do it. I don't think it's impossible, but I don't think so. I'm going to throw out a bunch of heroes now randomly. I'm
Yeah,
going to throw
let's go.
out, I want Falcon, I want Winter Soldier, I want Nick
Mhm.
Fury, who I think is 100% confirmed, basically.
Yeah.
And, he's the
Who
shield
else wears
guy.
that kind of who else wears that trench coat
Well, you never know.
in the silhouette? Yeah, it's actually Beast.
Hey, I would be happy with that, to be honest with you. I don't know why he's in the shield thing, but um, but there's also I think apparently a lot of people are really excited for Quake. I've never watched the Agents of Shield show. Apparently she might be in that or something. People are really excited for that. And that's got the same expansion name. People also talked to me about White Widow. I was a bit skeptical of this at first. This is Yelena, I think, kind of in the
Yeah.
MCU. I didn't know she had that much of a direct affiliation with Shield. I'm not a comics person, and I'm thinking they've already got a Black Widow. But people kind of talked me around to it, and I kind of got excited for that. I think that could be a really fun new way. She could use preparations as well potentially, but use them in a different way, which would bring new
Oh, that'd be
context to the existing ones. So there's so many Shield characters I'm excited for.
I'm really excited for Agent 13. I wanted to I didn't hear you say that, but I wanted to slip that one in because like she's one of the allies that we already have, and so like I'd be interested to see how she implements her ally ability. Like anytime she basics, so she gets a ready a shield support. Like that'd be crazy, right?
That would be
And so like
insane.
I'm here for it.
That'd be so funny. I wonder how many times you can ready Agent 13. I guess you could do this with the ally. I'm just imagining the ally now, readying a helicarrier like 10 times. Or,
Yeah.
there's a new card cell phone you could kind of use to manipulate that, which is interesting. Make people activate on other turns. That's a bit off topic, but yeah, so super exciting stuff. Is that the one shield hero you'd be most excited for, or do any of the other names excite you more?
I think from a mechanic standpoint, I'm most interested in Bucky, like the Winter Soldier, just because I think that he can revolve a lot around weapons, and I'm very excited to see more weapons in the game and how that can
Yeah.
shake up. So from a mechanic standpoint, I think Bucky is going to be really cool. From a thematic standpoint, Nick, I like Nick. He feels like the commander. I think he's going to be really fun. I assume that he's going to be heavily supportive of a hero. And so I'm excited to see how that goes. But also just coming from Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf is, the Lord of Rings version of Nick Fury in the game. When they printed the Gandalf hero, it's so freaking cool because it had to be so cool because everybody's running Gandalf, everybody's running Nick Fury, so you have to make the hero worth not running that ally. And so from like just kind of from a historical standpoint, Nick is also one of those. I'm like, ooh, that seems kind of fun.
That's really fun. I've barely played Lord of the Rings. I have, and I have played the Gandalf ally, but only a couple of times.
Yeah,
So that's a really interesting observation, and I feel like they're going to do it. I feel like Nick's going to bring something really interesting. He's going to be leadership, do you think?
yeah. I mean, like he would have to be right. I could maybe see an argument for justice, but he's the leadership. He is the leadership hero here. I definitely see that. I ooh, now I'm just kind of thinking because I've always wanted um a team building. Do we have shield heroes?
We have shield alter egos, but we have no shield hero right now.
Yeah, so one of my most excited things to do, because we in this box, I presume we will have shield traded heroes. Team building exercise can play Maria Hill off turn. And so I'm very excited to do that.
That is pretty good.
Right? So we're gonna be able to you're always gonna be able to give that card draw out to anybody if you have a team building exercise. But TBE is hero only, and we don't have any shield traded heroes. And so I'm excited. I think Maria Hill would be a really fun hero too. I'd be interested to see how they do her.
Can I let you into a little secret though?
Please, yes.
There is a card called Government Liaison that can play Maria Hill off turn right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
but
That's
it,
cool.
but it
Oh,
doesn't.
that's fun.
But you don't maybe have enough shield cards in an average deck to make it worth it. Aside from Maria Hill, you could argue.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's going to be interesting. You know, I think getting more cards that we can use Field Agent for, because you talked about that. That's just
Yep.
this one cost support that can basically block consequential 3 times for shield allies. One of the reasons I don't use that card very much at all anymore is because I don't think there are a lot of good shield allies for it to block damage from. I think Agent 13 is great, but other than that, maybe Coulson. There's not a lot of shield, allies where I wouldn't rather just, put a lot of that money toward just playing a fresh ally in general. So I think getting more shield allies, both for Field Agent, but to exhaust for things like Homeland and maybe get things that exhaust in other aspects, that could be really fun too. So, Maria Hill team building exercise could be really good, and you could get other shield things there for it. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of questions from Kai. Would love to hear what hero you think works best with shield, and also what cards do you think are given in a shield justice deck. Um, and then once you answer this, I would want to have you follow that up with what hero do you think is going to maybe get one of the bigger boons with the new expansion?
So in terms of what hero works best with the shield archetype, with actual synergy that really boosts it, I think it's got to be Captain Marvel. There's a reason I had her on the table in part of that 2-player double disguise game earlier, because she's got Alpha Flight Station, which goes kind of ridiculously with Agent 13 readying it up. It's just so many cards. So that is incredibly good. I also do love a bit of a Shield War Machine, although I think
Oh, that was my answer. Yeah.
yeah, I took your
Emissions
answer.
bunker. No, you're good. You're good. It validates my answer if you take it.
Yeah, I think that's just really fun. I kind of like it with Black Widow because you can actually ready up the safe house as well. I just love Agent 13 readying up those specific supports. And I think getting more supports will be interesting. I don't know if there's any one hero that's going to, really get a huge benefit that's kind of missing something from Shield to work with it. Although, maybe I'll throw Spider-Woman out there. She does incredibly good stuff with Shield right now. But if I want to play like Shield Justice and then another aspect, I kind of look at leadership because it's got the other Shield stuff there. But I'd love if I could lean more into like protection shield stuff because we do have the Black Widow ally, that kind of thing. I think that would be really fun to elevate kind of the hybrid shield decks in other aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I also really like Nebula. Um,
Oh,
yeah, because Shield does really well at enabling you to stay in alter ego. And so Nebula being able to play her technique upgrades and then getting that rebate. So right, you're paying 2 resources, you're drawing 2 cards. So you're able to kind of build up and then you can flip up and just like unleash the Nebula force, right? And just like go kind of crazy with that. So any hero that has wants to build an alter ego, you could probably, and you have to be a little careful because shield is a huge build archetype. And so when I say like wants to build an alter ego, like Black Widow gets that card draw, Nebula gets that card draw, but like Tony, like that's a lot of building. That's a lot of building for a solo player. And so I think that the like Nebula is kind of that more like obscure answer that I've had a lot of fun building a shield deck with her and just like building a ton of guards and then flipping up and then just like lethal intent and then letting them all go loose. It's pretty fun.
that's really fun. I like that a lot. And I really like Nebula. So that's cool to hear her kind of talked about that like, interesting kind of way.
Do you think that we're gonna get either Probably not in hero form because there's just so many shield. Do you think we could potentially start doubling up on some of these allies and get another Captain America ally, or another Black Widow ally, or anything like that?
I'm gonna say yes. I think getting a Black Widow ally. I mean, if we get White Widow, it could be a signature ally, I suppose. I
Oh,
don't,
true. Yeah.
but I could actually see it being an aspect ally as well. What if there's an alternative to Coulson getting a preparation? What if like Black Widow did something with a preparation, something like that? That
Mm.
could be interesting. Maybe this is just off the top of my head. I don't know how you'd balance this or if it would be any good. But what if she could swap one preparation for another in your discard pile or something like that,
That'd be cool.
or
That'd be really cool.
get a preparation from any player's discard pile, kind of thing, something like that for
Make the call
multiplayer.
for preparations. Oh, that'd
Yeah.
be cool. That'd be really cool.
So
I do hope that we see more preparations. I think, that's kind of, I've seen that discussion around online that, preparation is one of those traits or those keywords that feels a little bit underloved ever since Black Widow came out. I don't think we've gotten a single one since the Widow pack. But Shield feels very much like a preparation kind of build around. So I could see us getting more preparations and stuff for that.
yeah, we
Pretty
we
cool.
actually have got like a few preparations since Black Widow, but most of them are basically never played.
Okay.
I think Wasp came with a couple. I know Valkyrie came with one in protection that no one uses called I think Anticipation, something like that. Uh,
Okay.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's around.
Nice.
But to your point though, I really think a Captain America ally with Shield maybe as a trait could be really fun because the current Captain America ally we have very expensive. So I'd love a bit more of an accessible Captain America ally. Maybe quite a splashable Captain America ally that I could just don't have to put in a big expensive Avengers deck. I can just throw anywhere because he's so iconic. I think he would be fitting for that type of ally.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good call. That's a really good call. Sweet. Anything else that you want to talk about with Shield or Justice before we kind of go into what's coming up next and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I really hope the Shield expansion / a scenario pack that wave or something comes with expert free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 That's true. I could see them throwing it in the box, right? Like we got standard 3 in a box. I could see expert 3 coming in the box. Um, I can definitely see that.
But yeah, I think that does it for me on Shield.
Nice. So let's talk about what is coming up on our channels. What are we doing? Any exciting things or what are we playing? What's on our table right now? Villain, I'll let you start.
Yeah, so on my channel, actually, a few days ago at the time this will come out, I've actually just released a video called Everyone's Favorite Villain. And this is a video which features not only me and Nelson, but a bunch of other creators, 20 plus 21 people, talking about their favorite villain. So check that out. I put way too many hours editing into that. So I've gotta plug it now. It has
Yeah, right.
and it's a great way to show off the community, which was the initial driving force behind it. So there's so many cool creators for Marvel Champions. Other than that, I'm continuing my little sort of villain season. It started a bit slower than I expected. I've mentioned it on other podcasts because it's summer and a lot of stuff is happening. But I'm really excited to get into that some more and sort of conclude that hopefully before Nightcrawler comes out, which I'm also looking forward to. That's happening next month. That's exciting. And yeah, that'll be it from me. What about you, Nelson?
Nice. Yeah. We're recording this the week that I got back from like my 2 weeks vacation / workcation. And so it's been a lot of catch up both from a streaming side and also like the businesses and stuff that I'm working with. And so I'm excited because I don't have a lot of travel coming up until like months from now. And so I'm kind of pumped to see what happens. I was telling Villain earlier, I have a whiteboard full of ideas of videos and kind of stuff that are going on. And I've found that I've recently been getting a lot more joy out of the videos that are less analytical. I think you do so much, or you do those so well. And I think that I get a lot of joy out of talking about things that I enjoy. And so I'm hoping to do more videos similar to that, where talking about favorite expansions and kind of stuff like that. So I haven't fully figured out what that looks like, but I'm pumped to talk. The analytical videos are not going to go away at all. I'm still going to do the hero and villain reviews, but I'm excited to have a little bit more time to talk about things that I really love about the game.
That's really, really cool. So coming up next on the podcast, next month, we're talking about the leadership aspect. I'm really excited for this. For the longest time, it was my favorite aspect. Is it still now? Well, It's really close to me between a lot of aspects, if I'm honest, but it's really fun. So much going on there. I think it has a bad reputation, and I'm excited to try and, do away with that and try and, redeem it in people's eyes, because I think, yeah, there's some, straightforward, more basic stuff you can do with it, but there's so much creativity, you can do with it as well. So I'm excited for that.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about blue. Blue has definitely been the aspect that went from my least favorite to I enjoy it probably more than justice, I would say. Just on an average. But yeah, I used to be a leadership hater, and I am no longer. And I'm excited to talk about
Yes.
why and how.
That is awesome to hear. I still think it was, an episode or two ago where you really preferred these new characters in leadership. I really preferred them in protection.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, right.
funny how that changed around. I think that was Bishop and Magic. So,
Yeah.
opinions can change, and, we'll see how it goes here. That's going to be very fun and exciting. Make sure you keep an eye out for the next YouTube community post. Nelson talked about it at the start of this podcast. If you want to send questions in, have us talk about something, keep an eye out for that. I post that usually, several days before we record. And yeah, I think that's it from me. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.